Yeah, hi. My name is Bill Swart, and I always enjoy coming to these conferences because of the variety of nationalities and disciplines that are represented. Yesterday I did a presentation, and a lady came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm in the Faculty of Education, and I'm so happy that we have something that has to do with education." and and that reminded me that, gosh, in my disciplines, which are engineering and business, if you do research on engineering, that is wonderful. But if you do research on how to teach engineering, that is, it's not really looked upon as very prestigious or the kind of thing that you really ought to be doing. It's almost like second-class research. And that is why I put this slide up, because I am not talking about education. I believe, having been in private industry, that every industry, in order to succeed, must do research on how to do what they do better. And that is also true for universities. And what universities do is they produce graduates. And consequently, everyone that is involved in delivering processes that create graduates ought to be involved in figuring out how to do that better. Now, we all have that in common, whether you are in engineering, whether you're in business, whether you're in sociology or law. We all, if we are at a university, we all share that common theme of we have to impart what we know into somebody else. Hence, when we talk about teaching and education, we're really engaged in what my friend Najib is really so passionate about, which is this whole thing about inter and intradisciplinary communications. Because when you teach or talk about how to do our job, which is teaching, better, then that applies to all the disciplines, and we can all participate on the same ground. So I thought I'd just mention that. My real topic today is essentially asking the question, which is better? What is a better experience for the student? Is it being over here, or is it being over there? And just for the heck of it, how many of you think that this is the better learning experience for a student? Okay. And how many of you think that this is the better learning experience for a student? Nope. One. Two maybe.
Yeah, my answer's move. Very bad question. Tricky question, not no bad question. Tricky.
No. The point is that there are strong feelings. As a matter of fact, if we look what is happening in higher education, currently 31.6, almost 32% of all college courses, all students are taught via distance learning. And that is increasing each and every year. As a matter of fact, the cohort of students that is coming to university is decreasing every year. So these are the trends. The enrollments are growing for distance education. If you ask distant education or university administrators, is distance education important for you? The vast majority of them will say, yes, it is an important strategic initiative. It's a way for us to reach out to students, get students, and in the United States, to get money. Okay? So distance education is typically thought by administrators as being an important strategic initiative for the university. At the same time, faculty in the same institutions, if the institutions does not have distance learning, only 12% of the faculty buy into the fact that distance education is somehow a legitimate way of learning. If you go to those schools that have distance education program, you still have a minority of the faculty that think that what they're doing is correct.
Well, that's different from whether it's good to do.
Yes, you're right.
So, again, in institutions where there is distance learning, still most of the faculty do not buy into the fact that that is a good way for students to learn. So, again, these are not my numbers. These are, every year there's a report that comes out on the status of distance education and what have you not. So, anyway, the interesting thing there is that, as you may have, as Professor Marlowe may have indicated, is that the question is kind of difficult because there really is no longer a dichotomy. It's not either distance education or classroom education. There's hardly, or there are not that many classrooms where some form of e-learning assistance is not utilized. So blended learning is really what is taking over and what has been coming along. And furthermore, university faculty are more prone to accept blended learning than they are prone to accept online learning as a legitimate way for the students to learn their material. Now, blended learning is here to stay. There are many, many ways of blending learning. And when you think of blending learning, you have to think about a lot of things. It's not just going in and giving a computer assignment and say, well, come back to class and we'll discuss it. If you think about blended learning, you have to sort of say blended learning means that things happen out of class and things happen in class. So since things happen at two different locations, you have to think about what kind of out-of-class learning materials your students should have. You have to think about what kind of learning materials they should have when they come in class. Welcome, come and join us. No beer today. So the other thing when you have blended learning is that you have to be very conscious of the classroom or the learning space that you use, because blended learning can involve collaboration. And if you meet in a classroom that is a stadium-type classroom, then it's very difficult to collaborate in that kind of a classroom. So learning spaces are an important component of what you need to think about as you think about how to blend your course. You also have to think about whether you're going to collaborate and where you're going to collaborate. Is that going to take place out of class, inside of class? And if it takes in or outside of class, students have now a different role to play. Before, a student is essentially the passive listener that sits there tries to catch the pearls of wisdom that the professors throw at them and try to internalize them. When they have to no longer be in that kind of an environment, then the question is, what does a student do? What must a student do besides passively learning? The same with the instructor. If you're not going to do this, you could, but if you're not, then how are you going to function? Are you going to be the sage on the stage, as they say, or are you going to be the guide by the side, being a consultant and a coach to your students? All of those are decisions that you consciously must make when you blend a course. And you must make them before you teach the course. So there are many, many ways of doing this, and everybody has their own ideas of what they should be. And ultimately, they go into a blender and something comes out. Now, there is no way of predicting whether what you put in the blender is going to be good or not. We only read about the wonders of blended or flipped learning. On the other hand, one of my colleagues was very interested in flipped learning. She decided to go ahead and implement flipped learning. She did all of these things to the best of her ability, put it in the blender, put it in the syllabus, and lo and behold, at the end of the semester, her students were very unhappy. They were less happy with the blended course than with the original course. So she was obviously crestfallen. And my point is, no. Don't be crestfallen. Don't be disappointed, because nobody told you that you did this with the right recipe. You need to fool around with the recipe. So the idea here is that when you fit all of these things in a recipe that we call a course syllabus, then once you have the syllabus, which is your best shot at how you should do all of the things that I just had, then you teach the course, then you should look at the results, you should analyze the results, see if it tastes right, if it works well, and if you have the data, then you must decide whether the soup needs a little bit of more salt or a little bit more hot sauce or whatever. The point is that by studying the results, you can get indications of what you can change in order that the next time you go through this, the syllabus is going to yield better results. So again, this is the old plan, do, study, act cycle that is very familiar to those of you who are familiar with quality control and TQM. It's called the Deming plan PDSA cycle, but it's one that we should employ when we teach in a systematic manner so that we can be assured that we do things in a manner that it is continually improving our students' experience. Now, I have gone through a number of cycles of the PDSA process, and I eventually zeroed into something that is fairly stable in terms of the results that come out, and quite good. And this works for me, it may not work for you, but I break my course into discrete modules, pieces, if you will. If you use a book, each module could be a chapter of the book, if you will. But I make a distinction between each chapter. I then apply something that I talked about yesterday, which is contextual leadership development. I'll explain that a little bit more, but the point is that if you're going to use collaboration, typically professors, at least in business schools and in my environment, they love to assign projects. And the minute a student walks in and looks at the syllabus and they find out that they have to do a project, they said, oh no, no, not another project. They are not that happy about doing projects. And our studies indicated that the reason that students hate it that much is that the professor assumes that they know how to work in teams. They may have had courses that tells them how to work in teams, but the fact is they simply don't know how to apply that knowledge. They do not know how to effectively work in teams. So we devised a process that we called contextual leadership development that basically says, look, you may be a business student, and if you did, you had a lot of teamwork theory. You may be an engineering student or a law student, you may not have had that. I don't care, but when you come in, the first 2 weeks of the course, you're going to get a review of what it takes to be an effective team. You're going to get a review of the principles. Then we're going to focus, if there is collaboration, on how to structure teams. A lot of professors say, I'm going to put a team together. I'll do it randomly because that is the way it's done in industry. Well, that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard, because in industry, you are concerned about how your project is going to succeed. The last thing you want to do in industry is to put people on a project that you have no assurance will be able to work together. So the whole idea is that team formation is extremely important. And then even more important is that when you have a team together, they must agree on what they as a team will achieve in measurable terms. Students have a heck of a time understanding what a measurable objective is. I tell them, give me a measurable objective of what you want to accomplish in this course. And I get these wonderful, flourishing papers basically saying we're going to hold hands and we're going to sing Kumbaya and we're going to love each other and all of those kinds of things. But that doesn't tell me what you want to achieve. And I almost have to kick them and tell them, what grade are you going to commit to get in this course? And I said, I don't care whether you commit to get an A or a B or a C, but you as a group must decide what you're going to achieve because you're going to help each other achieve that. So we have that contract signed by every student that tells them what they're going to achieve and how they're going to work together. Now, once they have that, then we know that many of these students have read about leadership and teamwork. But that is like reading about riding a bicycle. You can read about riding a bicycle all you want to, but the first time you sit on that thing, you're going to bust your can. So you can't just read about leadership and then go out and say, I'm a leader. That's not going to happen because you're going to fail. You have to develop these abilities and those particular skills. So the way we do that is we break the course into modules because we allow students to collaborate on each module. And the collaboration means preparing for an exam. Now the exam is an individual exam. So the students collaborate to obtain subject matter knowledge. Now they go back to the same process. Now, if they were not successful in the first exam, they're going to find out, ooh, I should have worked more closely with my team members, so I should have learned better. So they develop not only their intellectual or the subject matter knowledge, but as they go through each chapter and work in teams, then they develop over time these team working abilities and these team working skills. And we call it contextual leadership development because you're learning about leadership in the context of learning your course's subject material. The way it basically works is we provide you with the teamwork knowledge up front, then you go into an interactive group-based project that helps you learn the material. You take the quiz. Now you go back. You've learned a little bit more about teamwork abilities. Now you go back and take the next chapter and the next chapter. So you have this feedback loop that where you have teamwork abilities reinforcing your leadership, your subject matter abilities or knowledge. It works. It works. I've done this. As a matter of fact, Quality Matters, one of their persons worked closely with me, Kay Shattuck. But we basically found that in all of these years where I taught the course the traditional way, this was essentially basically where, oops, I got the wrong course. I got the wrong graph, please disregard that. What I found is that in all of the years that I taught the course in the traditional way, my average grades at the end of the semester increased by 10 points, by a full letter grade. Astonishing. Median, the same thing. The thing that gratified me most is this. I didn't have a bunch of Fs and a bunch of As. That range, which is what this indicates, before we started to blend or flip the course, this was essentially the difference between the highest and the lowest grades at the end of the semester. Look at what happened after they started to flip. All these grades started to come together. And I see my job as making students get good grades. I get very upset when I see grades over here. So my effort then is to make sure that this goes up, and in fact it did. So this again is documented. Blending, flipped learning works. And furthermore, it works. We received the Instructional Innovation Award for this contextual leadership development at a big international conference last year, and it's going to be published later on in October. Yesterday, I had a number of questions which made me realize that I was not particularly lucid in the way that I presented the material. So I just will review some of the questions that I got about collaboration. And that is, hey, what do you do when a member of a team is not willing to work and is relying on other team members in doing the work? Well, very simple. There is no team grade. You take an exam as an individual. And if you have to take the exam as an individual, you're going to make darn sure that you're going to learn that material to take the exam. You cannot benefit from a team grade. You cannot hide, if you will, behind your students. So that was one of the questions that I got. Another one was, how about do you deal with a student who does not want to collaborate and wants to work on his own? Well, I always give, pardon the expression, damn hard problems for teams to work on. Problems that are difficult for any one brain to solve in the period of time that they have. So if somebody says, look, yeah, I can do this, well, when they take the first exam and realize that they could have done better, then they change their mind. So one way of working through this is simply make sure that the work is so challenging that it requires teamwork. And people will always say, oh, what you gave in the exam is not the same as the examples that you did in class. No, of course not. Of course not. I want you to take the examples that we have in the class, but the purpose of the class is for you to be able to take those ideas that that I presented in the examples and apply them to different and more difficult situations, because that's what you're going to find in the real world. I also, okay. Another question, how do you handle competition for grades in a team? We, unfortunately, in my opinion, teach students to compete against each other for good grades. And that forces students to, as you would say, Najib, to learn for the exam. If you force competition, students just want to get a good grade, and they're going to get old exams and do whatever they can and learn how to pass that exam, and not necessarily internalize that subject matter. So what we do is we say, hey, we essentially, at the beginning of the semester, you signed a document saying what grade the whole team was going to get. And if you agreed what team the whole team got, then if you get a better grade than the team, that is eventually going to be punished, because we do a peer review. And the peer review is very simple. We ask at the middle of the semester and at the end, did this guy meet with what you signed up for with the team charter? Yes or no? Did you meet with the team charter? Do you think this guy? So you ask people if their colleagues in the team did what they agreed to do in a team charter. And if the answer is no, they can, again, we have, some people may say yes, some people may say no, but out of 5 points, if you get a 4 or better, then you do not get a deduction in your grade. But if you get tagged as being a non-cooperative person, then you can even flunk the course. So there is a penalty for not doing what you agreed to do at the beginning of the course. How do you handle competition between teams? Another question that I got. I said, well, I don't. But the point is, there is nothing to compete. The only thing to get in the course is an A, but if you get an A, that doesn't impact you getting an A or you, because I don't ration out the grades. I'm happiest if everybody can earn an A. Then I've done my job. Flunking students is easy. Giving hard tests is easy. What is difficult is giving hard tests and making them pass. That's the challenge I think we all face. So, within that, so much for the questions, but what we have shown so far is that for on-campus courses, face-to-face courses, this approach beats this one by 10 points in the final exam over years and years of data that we have. So great. The other question, of course, is there's a great tendency towards online learning. In my particular university, in the MBA program, we have over 800 students enrolled. 750 are taking it online. So online, I'm not even getting to the punchline yet. Okay. Okay, so how did we transfer the information to online? Well, we give the same information for the student to study on his own. There's no difference between online and online here. The difference is that after online, students come to collaborate in a classroom. Here they come to collaborate in a virtual team. Everything else is the same. We use the exact same learning material, the same team formation, everything else is the same. So we basically mimicked or emulated the flipped classroom experience in the online environment. It worked. In an MBA class, you don't get a lot of F's and C's and all of that. You get mostly A's and B's. And before, we had about the same percentage of A's and B's. After we flipped the class and started doing the teamwork stuff, all of a sudden we had many more A's than B's, which is the result of people working in a team and taking responsibility for each other's grades. Okay, now, which is better? Okay, I'll skip over this. We use transactional distances, which is essentially a measure of the barriers that students find to active learning. This is an instrument that we used. Again, we have published all that, but the point is that we took data of over 700 students, 726 students, online classes, face-to-face classes, graduate classes, undergraduate classes, taught by me, taught by somebody else during the regular term and during the summer. This is basically all the shake and bake stuff you can do. Now, after we looked at that, we then asked the question, does when you take the course make a difference? Does the instructor make a difference? Does whether it's graduate or undergraduate make a difference? Does whether it's online or face-to-face make a difference? Does the type of classroom make a difference for the face-to-face courses? Does the gender make a difference? And then do these transactional distance or barriers that students find to fully engage in learning, does that make a difference? All on satisfaction. We threw all of this stuff for the 700 students into stepwise multiple regression, and basically the bottom line says that these are the significant variables. Let me simply list them here. First of all, what's important is how well the student relates to the subject matter. That was the single most important thing. The next most important thing is how the student related to the teacher. And this is regardless of whether it's online or not. How well the student related to the fellow student was third in line, which was a surprise. Then whether the course is graduate or undergraduate. Well, here I must say that the difference between graduate and undergraduate is that we did the team contextual leadership development only in the graduate courses, so that accounts for the difference. And then what really surprised us that we have a summer session where the student must learn everything in the course, normally a semester, in 5 weeks. It's an everyday experience, a quiz every day, an exam every Monday. And much to our surprise, students were much happier, much more satisfied with the summer course, the intense course, than they were with the regular course. A big surprise until we found out why. So the bottom line is that this variable which signifies is there a statistical difference between the mode of delivery, face-to-face, or online, there is no significant difference. We said, well, if that is true, then an alternative way of finding out or to corroborate our results is if you ask students whether they would recommend the course to a friend. That is a measure of satisfaction. If they say yes, you wouldn't steer your friend wrong and say, no, take this course. You basically would say, yeah. So we did what is called a logistics regression. And the logistic regression basically comes up with a likelihood that you, a person, will recommend the course to a friend. And we found the exact same result. Okay, the variable liberty was not a significant predictor of satisfaction. So our data indicates students learn better. And furthermore, there is no difference in satisfaction between online and face-to-face courses. Summary, 724 students. If you teach a face-to-face as a flipped class, if you flip your online class to emulate what we do face-to-face, then students will be just as satisfied in one mode, in online, as opposed to face-to-face, and learning will improve. Basically, I have 200 and some reflection statements from my students, voluntary, And basically, this one says, this course has changed my entire perspective on online classes and taught me a great deal about myself and how I work with other teams.